Loving God, be in my thoughts, be in my words, and bless each of those that would hear them. Amen. Well, good morning, and I'm very excited to be here on United Methodist Women's Sunday. Today I'm going to continue Pastor Yvonne's sermon series on looking back at First United Methodist Church, Georgetown, our history, and the connection that our story as a church has with scriptural narratives. As sometimes we see our own personal stories in the scripture, our church can see its collective past in the narratives of the Bible. So each week she has been bringing a different story, pretty much in chronological order, a group of stories about time periods in our church. Today I'm not going to focus so much on a chronological time, but on a group of people. So as it is the Sunday set aside by the United Methodist Church for a specific group of people, the United Methodist Women. United Methodist women aren't quite as old as First Methodist Georgetown. Our church is 170 years. First United Methodist Women, or its predecessor organizations, celebrate 150 years this year of service to women, children, and youth, the most vulnerable in society, trying to help make a better world for them. United Methodist Women have gone by lots of different names, but this focus has stayed strong. And whether they went by United Methodist Women, Women's Society of Christian Service, Women's Foreign Missionary Societies, and other names I'm sure I'm forgetting, the women of this United Methodist Church have had the same focus on women, children, and youth, and they carried it out in some really amazing ways. At times when, at the beginning of the origins, women in the 1800s were not seen much more as chattel, all the way up to the 1960s, when a woman still really didn't have the voice they have today. In Acts, our scripture this morning, we learn about Priscilla and Aquila. They traveled to Ephesus with Paul, they taught at the temple, and they learned from Paul. So if you pay attention to our scripture reading, you'll see the first time their names are listed. They're listed Aquila and Priscilla. Husband's name is first. They partnered together. If you read some background of the scripture and study some scholars, people a lot smarter than me, they will tell you that there is a significance in the order in which names are given in the Bible. So the other times Priscilla's name is listed, it's listed first. That's no accident. That means that she had a leadership role in this ministry. But at the time, she was probably seen nothing more as chattel without any rights. So she knew to bring about God's work, she had to work in that space that she existed to do what God had her to do. And by doing so, she not only taught the people in the temple, she was able to carry out the work of Paul even after he left, thus instructing Apollos. And Apollos went on, and his ministry bore fruit as a result of that teaching. So as with Priscilla, the women in the history of our church have not only worked within their sometimes limited space to accomplish the purpose of God, but they've also created space and partnered with men, let men think they took the lead on it. Sorry, husbands, we're really good at this, making you think it's your idea. Sorry. So in 1984, early on in our church history, the Ladies' Aid Society was founded. And this took about raising funds to take action relative to the needs of the church and the community. And their task, and I'm quoting a document I read, was to visit sick and the strangers and to arrange for the decorations of the church. But they still got done what God was calling them to. So between 1897 and 1898, a chapter of the International Order of the King's Daughters and Sons was formed in Georgetown by members of Georgetown Methodist Church. The Order of the King's Sons and Daughters was an organization that originated in 1886 in New York by a group of ecumenical women. And they formed to be self-improvement and Christian service. It was based on Psalms 45:13. The king's daughter is all glorious within. Her clothing is wrought of gold. So the Georgetown Circle was named the King's Daughters Silver Cross Circle, and the membership was all female. The primary mission of this group was initially to provide for people in need. And then they went on, as their influence expanded, they became today they're Georgetown's oldest philanthropical organization. They no longer exist, but they provided services for 63 years. So as they continued to expand, there was a need for a full-time hospital in Georgetown. And the first hospital in Georgetown was founded by these women, and it was called the King's Daughters Sanitarium in 1918. It was a home on a double lot, not too far from here, the block of 1508 and 1510 Ash Street. True to the times, in the Georgetown Sun, the article was published that is a true credit of this enterprise, and it belongs wholly to the King's Daughters chapter here, preeminently to Mrs. J.M. Daniel. But the previous efforts of the Sun and the Young Men's Business League, they had originally awakened the desire on the part of the people and prepared the way for this movement. I don't think the women cared. I think they felt like it was more important that the job got done. And the book that I got that from, I would be remiss to point out, it's a book that was published a little over a year ago called The Care and Keeping of Georgetown. And it is a history of the Georgetown Health and Care Associations in Georgetown. And when you read the book, you will find this church's footprints and fingerprints all over it. So thus, once again, I imagine that even though women had a vision and put the work in, they knew to see how that work was accomplished, they had to partner as they could. Another great resource, and I know I'm not supposed to do this for the video. You'll have to apologize to 11 o'clock for me. So I have to show you my visual aid. This is a very old book that was shared with me. And if you can't see it very well, it's very tattered, and it has on the front WSCS record. This is the meeting minutes from the Women's Society of Christian Service from 1947 to 1964. There are so many amazing accounts in this of women and men working together to bring about the kingdom, or as we like to say in this church, living out God's love everywhere we go. So the minutes from March 1846, I think, provide a really great snapshot of what was going on at the time and the influence of these women. So I'd like to read from the minutes. Starts out, the parsonage committee told us of the main bedroom furniture in the parsonage: bed, springs, dresser, chest of drawers, platform, rocking chair, straight chair, scatter rugs. The parsonage committee paid $100 down, but they were needing more money. So it was moved that we back them up and pay the rest of the bill of over $90. I don't know about you, but I'd love to furnish my whole bedroom for $190. So they took care of the furnishings, but then they go on to say that Brother Oglesby spoke to us of a call he received from the Mexican pastor and told him of a project that they had on hand with the promise of $1,000 seed money or more from the Methodist Board of Missions for an annex to the Methodist Church, Methodist Mexican Church. Since Brother Oglesby has been thinking of possibilities for this, he told us of opportunities that would offer social service within the annex as serving as recreational headquarters, as well as the original purpose of Sunday school. Many things could be done for the Mexican young people by our Methodist young people, and possibly by college students. The project was left in the hands of the Secretary of Social Relations of the WSCS. After the business session adjourned, they heard a lovely violin section and closed the meeting listening to Professor Hester give a talk on world peace. So did you catch what all was going on here? The women saw to it that there was adequate furniture for the parsonage. They knew that that was their role. But when the pastor had an opportunity presented to him to further mission and ministry in the city, where did he go to consult? With the WSCS. He recognized them as women that could get the job done. And then, we like music. I know the United Methodist women here, we like music a lot. So we listened to music, and then we concluded learning about world peace. And let that set in. Think about this. This is 1947. We have just gone through a huge war, and they are talking about world peace. So, an amusing story I have to share with you in another document about how these same women got things done. A lady named Otha Ulrich recalled a time when a bishop was expected in Georgetown for a rare visit. And this story goes back to how they knew what was expected, but they used all manners of creativity and spontaneity to get it done. So the church ladies pulled their best china, finest silver, cooked their choicest foods, prepared to serve for this party an elegant dinner. It was to be held in the parsonage at 13th and Ash after the bishop concluded his meetings with several church officials. As the dinner hour neared, the bishop unexpectedly left the parsonage. He walked over to the presiding elder's home on Elm Street and 13th, a full block away. After considerable wait for him to return, the ladies were convinced that he expected to be served at the Elm Street residence. They hastily packed all dinner service, containers, hot food, and hurried from one parsonage to the other in a roundabout way so that the bishop would not see them. They tiptoed through the back door, set the table, were almost ready to serve, when once again the bishop looked at his watch and guiltily said goodbye to the elder and dashed back to Ash Street, where he remembered he was overdue for dinner. The determined ladies were already wary, and so they were hot and out of breath, but they didn't care. They repacked, moved everything back to the original headquarters, and somehow managed to have dinner underway in time. Yes, we are resourceful. We are resourceful. Last Sunday, Pastor Yvonne shared with you about an amazing mission that was hosted here in this church by Southwestern University, the Negro Fine Arts Program. And we do have a historical plaque outside of the north entrance of our church that honors that. Well, she shared with me that one of our wonderful church members, Nettie Ruth Bratton, and I hope she doesn't mind me sharing, sent Yvonne a message and let her know. Nettie Ruth writes that, in fact, I was the one that had the idea from a class I was taking with Dr. Biff Jackson and brought it to him and Miss Bowden. They carried the ball, and it was a great success for 20 years. It was a great gift to Southwestern students who had a chance to meet the Black students. And she goes on to mention that there is actually a book that documents this, written by a professor at Southwestern University, Dr. Martha Mitten Allen, who was also a church member. Another story that happened about the time of 1946 that I will also have to tell, and this is in the voice as it was written down by another member of the church, Nell Benold. And she writes that she came to Georgetown in 1946, a student at Southwestern, and we had a new young minister, Reverend William Morgan, who began an outreach to the students at Southwestern. A few years later, when I was newly married, our little circle, this is her WSCS circle, did a study on the plight of the Negroes. And I am quoting the language of the day, which is probably not the language we would use now. They started a used clothing store on the square selling clothes for a little bit, buying crayons, school supplies, and so on, so they could start a little daycare in Mary Bailey's home. She was already keeping the African American children who were running loose on the ridge. And we formed a little school. This outreach eventually became the Mary Bailey Daycare, and today in Georgetown, we have the Mary Bailey Head Start that is in operation today. Another church member I was honored to spend some time with this week, just listening to her stories and her helping me put together things that might be meaningful for you, is Barbara Pierce. And she shared a story of what did she call her? She said, this was the woman that got things done. Her name was Linda Graves, and she was the wife of Pastor Tom Graves. And she was here at the church whenever Barbara and Dr. Pierce came to Georgetown in 1972. She recruited Barbara and some other the newer members of the Sue Mood WCS Circle to organize a young women and to go down and lobby the county commissioners, who, think about 1972, they were still all men. It wasn't quite the open forum we have today. And they went down, and she recruited these young women to go lobby the county commissioners to vote to form a Williamson County Child Welfare Board, because if they did, they could receive state funds for foster care. Well, it's a little like the story in the Bible of the unjust judge. Remember the woman that had to keep going back, and she was such a nuisance that he finally said, okay, I give in? Well, Barbara told me they had to go back quite a few times, and pretty much they just wore them down by their presence. And because of that group of women, Georgetown has a foster care system. Rather, Williamson County does. Sue Mood was amazing and ahead of her time. Linda Graves was ahead of her time. She organized efforts to start recycling glass in Georgetown at the beginning of the environmental movement. She served on the United Way of Georgetown and expanded its focus. She raised funds to build the Georgetown Hospital in 1979. She was named Most Outstanding Woman by the Chamber of Commerce in 1975. So many accomplishments of this one person who organized other people to cause ripple effects leading up to today. I can keep naming all these remarkable women in our past and some who are still so part of our present. And it reminds me of the naming of the lineage of Jesus, I believe, in the New Testament. And it talks about sometimes we just have names. There's a few women scattered in and out. We really don't hear their story, but each name represents story and significance, bringing about the birth of Jesus. And I look at that when we look at the stories of these women, their holy stories, their holy contributions, their lives lived to the service of the church and the betterment of the community. They're working in partnership wherever they need to. Husband and wife teams like Priscilla and Aquila, and just a few more women in our history that I'd like to share that represent stories of bringing about positive change. And just naming names, Esther Weir, who lived until 101, she started an architectural movement with her daughter. Her daughter was an architect, and she was instrumental in revitalizing our square. Genevieve Atkins, as you'll recognize that name, is on our Atkins Learning Center. She was active in historic preservation efforts. Pat Giddings organized a group of women to make the needlepoint cushions for our kneelers, which I imagine are the ones you see today, and they are still so beautiful. And we can't forget Clara Scarborough, who so diligently kept record of the history of Williamson County, Georgetown, and our church. There are so many names to list, and there are men included in these stories, but today we're just taking a time to lift up the women. So many things I am skipping because I know you don't want to listen to history forever, even though I could talk about it forever. There are so many stories, and I apologize for the ones I've left out, for the names I've gotten wrong, for the people that I didn't put in the correct name, place, or date. But I want to conclude with something that Barbara Pierce told me, and I think it sums up what I want to say, and it's better than you listening to me ramble until I get there. And she said, as I've thought about, Janna, what you and I had talked about women being involved behind the scenes in caring, in a cooking role, taking care of the parsonage, I think even back then, women knew the power they had revolved around caring for others. Whether it was family, children, those in the community, it was those who were vulnerable. Providing food was a way of building community. They were practical. They helped purchase refrigerators and furniture, but they also studied and learned about issues that affected the community and took action as well. Thanks be to God.